little while to start. Okay. So again, I just went to our daily agenda. I clicked on the lab notebook that is sitting on the table. It is in the process of loading right now. And our homework last night was related to viruses. We did quite a bit yesterday with living and non-living, as Ms. Sheehan brought up. We talked a little bit about characteristics for things being living or non-living. And so I'm wondering how our information that we gained regarding viruses, how might we end up categorizing these things as living or non-living? But first, I think I'd really like to just take some notes in our lab notebook regarding viruses in themselves. So I think we should scroll down to our Unit 2 materials because that's where we're at. Yesterday, we had a copy of this living and non-living material that we put in here. We've got lots of space on this page, so why don't we shrink up our text boxes? And with those text boxes, why don't we create a new one that is just notes regarding viruses? So I'm just gonna come down here at the bottom of this page. Somebody said that viruses are easily spread. What else? Well, what other discoveries do we make of viruses? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. They're kind of like a parasite. What do you mean by it's a parasite? Like, is there something that it does that causes you to say it's similar to a parasite? Okay. Okay, lives inside a host and can't live. Can we say can't live very long without that host?
Yeah. Yeah, because coronavirus is not quite.
Okay. So some thoughts regarding the coronavirus and the fact that maybe it doesn't live very long outside of the human body. So it makes me wonder why is the human body such a good location for it to quote unquote live? What's happening in the human body to cause it to be able to live there, I guess. What else did we learn about viruses through our studies last night? The first bullet? Yeah. Yep, I'm going to zoom right in on it. How about that? I didn't make it very large. Is that better?
Yeah.
So we have easily spread. It's a parasite, so it lives inside a host and can't live very long without a host. So we termed it similar to a parasite. And then it has to have some type of host. What other things did we learn about viruses? Yes, ma'am? Okay. They attack the system of the host. System or systems. All right, I would like for you to talk to your neighbor about one thing that you have discovered about viruses, think, pair, share, and then one of you is going to be prepared to sound off. Online folks, you guys just have a conversation as a group of totally online students. If you wanted to just type your thoughts in the chat, that would be perfectly fine. Take 2 minutes. Think, pair, share, go.
Riley. Dumb and actually was better than decent time. Yeah, you also have a freaking full rating. Are you gonna say anything or do I need to? Something you learned about viruses. It's not. You need to pay attention. I know what
I'll say something about it.
One more minute. All right, it sounds like we're ready to move on with some of our thoughts regarding viruses. Somebody from each group, I'd like to hear from you. What did we discover? They can only multiply what? Ooh, they can only multiply inside living cells. And by multiply, do you mean reproduce? Okay.
Most viruses only eat dead stuff until there's no dead stuff left. You start eating your live flesh, your live living cells.
Okay, so their food, question mark, is cells? Okay. Yes, ma'am?
Are they involved in natural selection?
Okay. Evolved through natural selection. Avery?
When in a host, white cells attack it.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
When in a host, white blood cells attack it.
Ooh, so our defense mechanism is white blood cells.
Yeah.
Okay. What other discoveries did we make? Okay, there are certain ways to help us treat.
Windsor.
Yep.
Can I say this? Can I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
So could I just say the viruses would be non-living technically?
Okay, what causes you to say that they are non-living?
Because they can't really reproduce on their own they can't until like they enter a living cell.
Okay. And so we said that in our model, criteria for you to be considered living is that you have to be able to reproduce. And you're saying, despite the fact that they do reproduce, they can't reproduce on their own.
Yes.
Okay? I appreciate you bringing it back to our model we developed and applying your thinking to that.
Thank you.
Mr. Windsor.
Yes, ma'am.
So I actually thought they would be living
Okay.
because, hold on, I wrote down why. Because they like feed off their hosts and they give off stuff to make them sick. And the like medicine that you guys were talking about kills them, and you can't kill something if it's not living. And it's kind of like a bacteria, and they're living because they like grow and stuff.
How do you do that? What do you mean, how do you do what?
You're not seeing a little circle.
What else did you have on there that I forgot to add?
I think you got it all.
Okay. Any other thoughts regarding this? All right, so we have alternate thinking. We have somebody that says they believe they are non-living because they can't reproduce on their own. And then our alternate thinking of that is that maybe they are living because they're feeding off of a host. This idea of feeding off. I want to know, how do viruses get their food? Because if we go back to our model that we said in order for something to be considered living, it can die. It has to be able to breathe. It has the potential of reproduction. It grows. And so we said larger in that it's making more cells. It requires water. It has working cells. It's a living thing, and so it uses energy. And so I think we talked about the use of energy being kind of similar to consuming food, and it produces waste. And so I'm wondering, this idea of using energy. You have a computer sitting in front of you. You have Google that is easily accessible to you. I want to know, what is the food to viruses? So could you take a moment and go look up virus food? What is it? We've got somebody that's already there. Somebody already thought ahead, and they were like, I'm curious about that statement about this idea of food. What did you come up with?
It says right here that viruses are too small and simple to collect or use their own energy, and they just like take it from the cells they infect, and viruses only use like energy when they make copies of themselves, and they don't use like any energy when they're outside of the cell. So that leads me to believe that like feed off the cells in the human body, and like that's their food.
Okay. So the statements on there were that viruses don't actually consume their own energy. They use up energy that's readily available inside of the cell. And so because of that, our thought is that maybe it's using the cell itself as its food. Okay? Other thoughts? I see many of you are kind of scanning Google and looking at some other things. What else do we have?
In the chat, I put that bacteria can make their own food, but viruses can only get food from external contamination. So that might be another way of saying that viruses are not alive and bacteria might be, because bacteria can make their own food and they can survive on their own, whereas viruses can't.
Okay. So your thought is that bacteria are able to kind of self-sustain outside of a host. However, viruses don't seem to be able to self-sustain. They don't seem to be able to live outside of a host, and so therefore they're non-living.
Yeah.
Okay. Did we discover any other information about viruses that we think might be pertinent to applying to this idea as to whether they are living or non-living? I know that there was a statement that was made that they can die, or organisms can die, and so therefore they are living. And so I'm wondering about this idea of death, because I see things that are what we might consider non-living, like a fire, and a fire can die. And so should we categorize a fire as living if it has the ability to die? Clouds form, they get bigger, sometimes they kind of reproduce, and you get separate clouds. Storms build up, and then they die off. And so I'm wondering, should we consider storms as being, or clouds as being alive? Because I know they can die. And if we're applying that same logic to all things, then we have a lot of things that we could consider being living that I don't know that we consider being living. Yes, sir?
It means like one or two of the criteria that we said, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a lot of things.
Okay, so the statement was, just because it meets one or two of the criteria that we have here does not necessarily mean that that we would consider it to be alive. And what did we end up deciding yesterday as far as the number of the criteria that need to be accounted for in this model in order for us to say something is living? Yes?
I have to add a comment about, I'm pretty sure Ella said it, how she thinks that the virus is living because it can die.
Mhm.
So I don't think, like, viruses can't die because they were never living in the first place. The body, I think, just like fights them off. So they
Okay.
don't, it doesn't necessarily die because it was never alive, but the body takes care of it.
So the proposal right now to Miss Ella is that you can't die because you weren't ever living, and your body is going to fight off that virus. So it's more of just a removal and not necessarily a death.
I don't know if you saw this, but Ella said in the chat that she changed her thinking.
I did not see that in the chat. Ella has changed her thinking. Miss Ella, could you elaborate on what caused you to change your thinking?
Okay, so my dog is barking right now, but I don't know, you guys just made a lot of good points, and I realized that I wasn't thinking about it the right way, and I just realized I was wrong.
Okay, so you're changing your thinking to a virus being non-living. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay, so is there anybody else right now that's saying, based on our model that we've developed, I still think that a virus is a living thing? Okay, it looks like we have a consensus. It looks like we are saying that viruses are non-living. Okay, let's maybe add that to our notes. So our consensus, our class consensus is that viruses are non-living. And I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say, I'm just going to turn this alternate thinking red. And that tells us that we changed our thought on it. It's no longer a thinking, and we're going with they are non-living because they cannot reproduce on our own. And that's our consensus as a group. Do we know anything else about viruses? Sometimes they what?
Sometimes these are DNA and RNA.
Interesting. They use DNA and RNA inside of the host body. maybe I should say host cells. Interesting. I had not considered this idea of DNA or RNA. And so now I'm considering DNA and RNA, and I'm wondering, what is it? What is its role? Is it important to living things? Got a whole bunch of questions kind of rolling around in my head regarding DNA and RNA, because I have some background information about DNA. I'm less understanding of this idea of RNA. That seems a little more foreign, but I mean, I watched Jurassic Park and they talked about DNA, and that made sense to me. Some of you guys are like, Jurassic Park, that movie is ancient, just like the dinosaurs. And you, Mr. Windsor. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on this DNA and RNA, and why we're talking about it with it being inside of a host cells? And I'm also wondering, how come we haven't talked about it with regard to living things yet? Should we talk about it with regard to living things? I hear a yes. Please elaborate. I'm unsure what just yes means. Yes. Oh.
So like, if you're living, you must have DNA.
Oh, so we need to add that to our model. So the statement was that we haven't done anything with genetic makeup of living things. And in order for you to be considered living, you need to have DNA or RNA, or maybe both, in order for you to be living. And we're saying this DNA and RNA is the genetic makeup of an organism. Okay, so let's go back to our model. And so we're saying must have genetic makeup, and we said DNA / RNA. Can we all agree upon that? Are we okay with genetic makeup, DNA, RNA, and all living things? So that would help me to discount a fire as being a living thing, even though it produces waste, it uses energy, it grows, it has the potential of reproduction. It seems to breathe because I know it uses oxygen, because if I cut oxygen out of like a candle, it's not going to continue to grow or even exist. But when I get down to this genetic makeup, I can say, oh, well, a fire doesn't have DNA. And so because it doesn't have DNA, it's non-living. Interesting. I like how we applied our knowledge here. Yes?
I just heard that viruses have either RNA.
Oh, interesting. So viruses have DNA or RNA. So we should add that about our viruses. They have either DNA or RNA. And so now they match a criteria we have added to our model. We felt that was important for all living things. And so now we have to come full circle back to, well, does that mean that a virus is living? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. I heard no, but then I didn't hear anything else. Yes?
No, because that's like only 2 things, and it has to meet all of our criteria to be living.
Oh, a living thing has to meet all of the criteria that is here and not just a few of them. So in order to be living, you would have to meet all of these criteria?
No, we said 4 or 5.
Oh, we said 4 or 5.
I don't think I got that.
Okay, so there's some disconnect. There's some people that are thinking that you don't have to meet all of these criteria. And there's some people that are thinking you have to meet all of the criteria. So we need to come to a consensus on how much of these criteria in our model does an organism have to exhibit in order for us to say that it is living? Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I was just gonna say, if we decided on 4, the virus does need 4 of the expectation.
Okay, so a virus meets at least 4 of them, and if we're saying at least 4, then a virus would be considered living. Ms. Stinson.
Well, I'm wondering, how can they have DNA and RNA if they don't have cells?
Ooh, how can they have DNA or RNA if they don't have any cells? Do we have an answer to that question in particular? Ms. Sheehan.
Because when the virus is running, that's all it is. And they, then without a host, then they wouldn't have any. So we can't take that virus, that's every day.
So what I'm hearing from Ms. Sheehan is that they are just DNA or RNA, and that's all they are. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah,
And-
and that's actually why.
Okay. So Ms. Stinson, you asked a then follow-up question because there was something that was confusing to you or didn't make sense or just didn't seem to be a connection. Can you ask your question loudly so we can all hear? Sure. Okay, how can DNA or RNA, how can a virus have DNA or RNA if they don't have cells? Okay. Where is DNA or RNA found in us? What is the size of DNA or RNA comparative to other parts of our body?
Not even a fraction.
Not even fraction. I'm unsure what you're meaning.
Very small.
It's like DNA or RNA is very small.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know of smaller parts of my body called cells. How does DNA or RNA compare to the cells that make up my body that are small? Ms. Warnke. Oh, DNA or RNA is extremely small then. It's even smaller than the cell because she said it's found inside the nucleus of the cell. So there's even a specific location where our DNA is housed. Okay. And so let's go back to Ms. Stinson's statement regarding how can a virus have DNA or RNA if it doesn't have a cell? Or if it's not a cell? It's a good question. I like it. Yes, ma'am?
I guess the virus could have DNA or RNA. It's small enough to live inside the virus. Because a virus is smaller than a cell.
Oh, how do you know a virus is smaller than a cell? Because you read it. Okay, so we found some information that viruses are smaller than cells. And maybe viruses go inside of cells. Okay. Yes, ma'am?
I was on that virus is in nucleic acid, and if it's in the nucleus, then it's technically not in the nucleus. So the DNA and RNA.
Okay, DNA and RNA are inside the nucleus. It's what we call a nucleic acid. Both of them are slightly different types of nucleic acids.
Yeah.
And they're found inside of the nucleus, hence the term nucleic acid, right? And so that might cause us to wonder, would a virus be found inside the nucleus of our cells as well?
Pretty much. I think it's just bit of the nucleus. That's what virus is. Then it would develop DNA.
Okay. I could not hear your question.
Different strains of DNA.
I could not hear your question.
I said, if a virus is different viruses, we could have different proteins of that.
Okay. definitely viruses affect different parts of your body. We've got COVID-19 floating around right now, right? And we can get it into our respiratory system, but then it seems to be spreading to other organs as well. It seems to be showing up in the kidneys. It seems to be affecting our nervous system, so the cells of our nervous system. It seems to be affecting the heart, the liver. Some pretty vital organs seem to be affected by it. And so it seems to be specific to certain types of cells, right? And so I'm wondering, why is it specific to certain types of cells? Yes, ma'am.
Because there are different strands.
Because they're what?
There are different strands of your DNA that impact.
Oh, so what you're saying is all of the DNA that is inside of the cells of my body, it's not the same? I thought all of the DNA inside of every single one of my cells is all the same. Okay.
Oh, wait, no, it's not, because some of them, they're mostly the same, but some of them have mutations.
Some of them have what?
Mutations,
Oh, some of our cells have mutations?
yeah.
Okay. I don't know if a mutation's a good thing. I mean, I kind of want most of my cells to not be mutated.
Yeah, you do, because sometimes it's a bad thing.
Okay, I agree. A mutated cell might be a bad thing. The thing I hear about all the time with mutated cells is cancer.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping all of my cells remain the same. Okay, let's swing back to this idea of DNA or RNA. And let's talk about what is the role of DNA inside of our cells? What does it do? Yes, ma'am.
Doesn't it give us the traits that we have?
Okay, we had a couple people talking at the same time. We have somebody that just said, doesn't it give us the traits that we have?
Like our hair color and eye color and all that?
Okay, so it seems to be making us. Is that what I'm hearing? It gives you your characteristics. Okay. Specifically, I think this is termed the production of proteins. Proteins are making you up, and so DNA or RNA is in the active process of protein synthesis, of making who we are. And so your DNA is responsible for that. Okay, so if a virus is a piece of DNA or a piece of RNA, and it goes inside of your cell, and its DNA or RNA might cause your cell to do what? Okay, maybe. So let's ask this question. If your cells are responsible, the DNA inside of your cells are responsible for making the proteins that make you. It's got a specific strand or sequence of DNA. Virus comes in. Slightly different strand of DNA or RNA. What might it do to the machinery inside of your cells or the DNA inside of your cells? Yes. Maybe. What do you mean by mutates it?
Like changes the sequence,
Oh, why would it change the sequence?
because it's a different strand of DNA.
Oh, so it might sneak into your DNA and cause your cells that are reading that strand of DNA to read them incorrectly, or read them with the virus DNA inserted into it as well, which would cause your cells to then do what?
Attack the white.
Maybe not attack white blood cells,
Whatever the virus strand.
because I think the virus is kind of tricky, and if the white blood cells are like, hey, there's a virus here, it's going to attack it, right? It's going to destroy it. And so I'm thinking that these viruses probably don't want to be recognized. And so they kind of, like Trojan horse kind of thing, like sneak into the cell by looking like there may be something that's not bad. And they get inside of the cell, and then what does the cell do with that DNA or RNA? Oh, it reads it. And then it does what by reading it? Oh, it duplicates it. It makes it, right? And so do you suppose maybe that's how we get more of them? Maybe something's happening where inside the cell, this virus is entering. It's kind of confusing the cell. The cell has machinery that is kind of duplicating or making copies of things or making proteins or whatever all of its other functions are. And it's being tricked into making whatever that virus is saying it needs to be made, right? And oftentimes it's just making copies of that virus, whether it's RNA or DNA. So in summary, we are saying that viruses can't reproduce on their own. They trick the machinery of the cell, and because they don't reproduce on their own, and also because they don't really have to consume their own energy, they kind of just steal it. So not really steal it, but they get the cell to use its own energy to produce them. They are non-living. They might be made up of DNA or RNA, but even though they're made up of DNA or RNA, they also are not made up of a cell. They don't reproduce on their own. They don't really have their own energy. They kind of commandeer the cell's energy in order to make copies. So thus far, based on our model that we have, our consensus is they are non-living. We have anything else that we need to add regarding viruses as far as information? Yes.
So do we figure out how many of the bacteria is living?
We have not really come to that consensus yet. We still have some argument, I think. We have some people that think that you only need 4 of these criteria. Some people think that you need all of them. Some people think you need 5 of them. So we maybe need to come to some consensus on this model. How many criteria in this model do you have to meet in order for you to be a living thing?
This is a little off topic, but I've noticed that multiple websites, instead of using the word growth, they use develop. And I don't know what we decided yesterday because I wasn't here, but I know the day before we were having problems with the word growth because of like the whole do rocks grow or do crystals grow or anything like that. And I think develop might be a better word because like people, we grow, but we also develop. So like we get older and our bodies develop, and like trees, they develop, and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, do you have a definition for the idea of develop? Because we said our definition of growth was larger in size by making more cells.
Hold on. Grow or cause to grow and become more mature, advanced, or elaborate.
Okay. What's our proposal here? Yes, ma'am.
Well, it's in the definition of the growth.
The definition of develop has growth in it. Is that what I'm hearing?
So that is growth, yeah.
Okay, so if growth is in the definition of develop, aren't they the same thing, was the statement that was made?
I would say no, because with growing, you're just getting bigger, but with developing, you're becoming more mature and advanced. So like
Okay.
as people were growing up, which means we're learning new things, and then like with trees, you become a seed, and then like you become more advanced in like the way you stand and all that kind of stuff. And the same with like plants.
Okay.
Like what you can do.
All right, fair enough. So I'm wondering, could we add both? Growth and development. So you're becoming larger in size by making more cells. And what else did we say regarding development? becoming more what?
Advanced or elaborate.
Are we okay with that? Miss Emily, can you support that?
Yeah.
Okay. So right now, our model now has growth and development. You're becoming larger in size by making more cells and becoming more advanced or elaborate. All right. Where do we want to go from here? This is what we are going to do next. Yes, you have a statement or a question.
We still need to come up with our numbers.
State that again.
We need to come up with our numbers.
Well, we still need to come up with our numbers. Yeah, how many criteria? How many criteria do you have to exhibit in order to be considered living? Yes, ma'am.
I think all of them.
Okay, there's the proposal for all. Okay, I'm seeing Miss Stinson shake her head. She's thinking all. There's a thumbs up there that we're thinking all. How many of you are continuing to think something lower than all? Oh, it appears as if maybe we have developed a consensus that in order for you to be considered living, you have to exhibit all of the criteria in our model. Interesting. Must exhibit all criteria in our model to be considered a living thing. Online people, can you support that?
Yes.
I got one yes. Other online people, can you support that?
I can.
Okay, I got another
I was
two.
gonna say all of them.
Yes.
What- I couldn't hear Ryan because I was too busy talking. Can you state what you said again, Ryan?
I was gonna say all of them but one.
All of them but one. So Ryan still thinks maybe we can go without one. Is there one in particular you're looking at, Ryan, and you're saying, I don't think we need that one?
The leaves.
We already deleted that one. That's why it's red in color. The red and the
Oh,
protective
well
zone
then,
food and oxygen.
never mind.
All the ones that are in red color we deleted, but I don't have a cross through on here, so I couldn't strike them out. I just didn't want to completely delete them. I wanted to know where we had been. So does that change your thinking then, Ryan?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in support of all as well? Okay. Excellent. All right, we are going to move on with a model deployment activity. So this is our model. We want to deploy it. We want to test it. We want to see if it works. We want to see if we can use it to help to understand whether something is living or non-living. So we're going to do that. And I'm going to shut off my screen sharing, and we are going to go into looking at some other organisms. And we are going to use these organisms, and we're going to organize them in a way to help classify them as well. Maybe pay extra close attention to some of the terms on the cards that you will see to help us to understand. Maybe there's other criteria we haven't identified yet. Maybe there's some things that we need to continue to adapt and add to this model, but as is right now, this is what we're running with. So we are going to go back to our daily agenda, our model deployment activity. I would like for you in your lab notebook under the bell ringer, I would like for you to answer this question: how can we organize living things? Why should we organize or group organisms? Under Wednesday's bell ringer. So I'm going back to my lab notebook. I'm going back to the bell ringer for this week. I've got my Monday, Tuesday one. We didn't do a whole lot with bell ringers for Monday, Tuesday, but then I've got my Wednesday one here. And I'm going to make a text box, and I'm going to answer that question.
Okay, so we don't have to draw it?
You don't have to draw it. You can just answer it this time. So how can we organize living things? Why should we organize or group organisms? All right. In your lab notebook, on the next page down that we've already duplicated, so right after the model that we started creating for characteristics of living things, and where we put our viruses information, we go down to the next page, and we are going to organize some cards, and we are going to develop a model of the way in which we might organize these organisms. We just answered this question related to why would it be important that we organize living things? And we've got some initial thoughts about why we would organize living things. With those thoughts in your brain, I want you to think about how you would specifically do that. I just posted on our Google Classroom a bunch of cards. Go to the Google Classroom and click on the animal cards. So if I'm under classwork, it says model deployment cards. You're going to click on that and just open up the animal ones. I guess maybe I should have renamed that. Might have been better if it was renamed, but it's the animal cards. It's a copy of 02B animal cards. And now you're gonna see a whole bunch of different types of animals. All kinds of cool animals. You're gonna take these cards, and by using your screenshot tool, you are going to organize these cards in your lab notebook. So maybe I'm sitting here and I'm going, I've got an organism. It's not the one I wanted. That's not the one I wanted. I've got an organism like the Arctic loon, and the Arctic loon is kind of like this elegant trogon. And so they're both similar. And so I'm going to use my screenshot tool or my Snippy tool, and I'm going to copy that card, and I'm going to go and I'm going to paste that card back into my lab notebook close to those two things. And I'm going to organize these organisms in a way that shows maybe their similarities or their common characteristics or whatever you think was important in their organization. Okay? If you would prefer to develop your model just using the name of the organism, that's fine, but I think probably having a picture of your card may be more of a benefit. How do you do a screenshot again? If you push the control,
Button 6.
yep, the control button and the open window button, it lets you drag a section of the screen to do just a screenshot of a specific portion of the screen.
Yeah, I know.
You could do it on both of these pages. You're asking how much how much space should we use? You can use both pages. Try to get them all on just this page though, just this one slide. Maybe not every one, but at least a representation of them. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing the screen. Go. What's your question?
So like we don't have to do every single one that's on here.
No, I think probably not. I would think that's probably not necessarily a requirement to have every one of them, but at least to have a representation of the ones that you do have.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
I'm confused on what we're supposed to be doing.
Okay, thank you for the question. Thank you for stating that. We are looking at the animal cards. The animal cards have a whole bunch of different examples. It tells about these different organisms, right? Gives you some information about them down below each one of them. You are going to create a model of how you would go about classifying these into groups. And my recommendation was to maybe take a screenshot of the card and then shrink it down and put the screenshot of the card in your model. And then there was a question related to, well, maybe I've got a whole bunch of them that I would call birds. And so do I really need to have a picture of all of what would be categorized as a bird? And my statement was, maybe not. That maybe wouldn't be a requirement. But having one representation might. Did I clarify?
Yeah, so we can just, all the animal cards just have to be separated into different groups, and we can like pick like how they're separated?
Absolutely. It is your opportunity to organize them how you think you should organize them.
Okay.
And you're putting it in your lab notebook.